Hello, friends. This is Doug Reeves from Boston, and we are about to talk about grading and homework, how you can make a difference for student results right now. Thank you for joining us from coast to coast, and we have a number of international guests as well. I want to let all of you know that this webinar is being recorded. We'll make available all of the video and audio recording of this available to you, and we'll also have the handouts for today's discussion as well. You can get those handouts right on your webinar handouts. So let's get to work. Before we begin with our formal work, I want to make sure that you have my personal invitation to visit the Creative Leadership Summit in Boston at the end of June. The QR code that you have in front of you, you can just put your smartphone right up to that, and that'll take you directly to the registration form. Just a few notes about that. It's a real all-star lineup. We have from Singapore, Dr. Chip Kimball, who leads one of the leading international schools in the world. We'll have Dr. Jennifer Price, one of the leading independent schools. We'll have Superintendent Roger Leone, who has transformed one of the most challenging urban systems in the United States, myself and many others. Excuse me. And so I think it's going to be a great event. Excuse me. Plus, Boston is just a great place to be at the end of June. You might even find a Sox game, a concert, or any number of things that we have to offer in our fair city. So please plan on joining us, and you can go to creativeleadership.net for more information. In addition, we have quite a number of free resources for you. In addition to today's discussion, we have weekly blog posts and case studies, videos, and tools all available for free downloads at creativeleadership.net. We have colleagues from all over the world who use these. And if you, a loved one, a colleague, are working on a dissertation, please don't forget, finishthedissertation.org. It is a free and non-commercial source for you to be able to help people who are among the 69% of doctoral candidates who never finish, help them cross the finish line. And we can help you do that at finishthedissertation.org. So here are the big ideas from today. There are a lot of myths about grading and homework. And I'm going to ask you in a few minutes to tell me why you think those myths are so pervasive. But the plain fact is that they're pervasive because people love comfortable explanations. They would, rather than studying astronomy, have a chariot to take the sun across the sky, and there's not a whole lot that we've learned in the intervening 3,000 years when it comes to preferring myths over scientific evidence. We don't defeat myths with oratory, but rather with experience. And so I'm going to give you some real examples today of how the myths about grading and homework were defeated, not by something that I said, and not by reading a book or an article, but by the actual experience of classroom teachers and school administrators. And I find these people just very inspiring. And I hope you will as well. And of course, change happens not from the top down, but from the inside out. It's not with superficial buy-in where you have the inspirational speaker talk, but rather by teacher to teacher, administrator to administrator, demonstrating what really works for them. So let's get underway. I want to begin by reassurances. I know that whenever you talk about homework and grading, it's a very emotional topic. And it's almost as if people assume that we're aliens. You know, one side is truth, justice, and the American way, and the other side is in favor of slovenly behavior by ne'er-do-well students. Wait a minute, friends. We're all on the same side. We all want academic success. We all want personal responsibility. Don't let your community, don't let your faculty, don't let your parents be divided by false issues like this. We are all on the same side. We all want student success and failure to reflect their real work and not either home factors or sympathy. So before we get all crosswise on these things, let's find out what our issues are that we all have in common. So let's get to work. You can make a difference right now. If you take nothing else away from our discussion today, it's the following. Make sure that people know that you can still have traditional A, B, C, D, F grading systems, that You don't have to go to some of the crazy talk that you hear at the National Convention about getting rid of grades, getting rid of transcripts. You'll still have A, B, C, D, F grades. You'll still have transcripts. You'll still have academic honors. That stuff doesn't go away. Now, what's most important is, I'll bet almost all of you report GPAs, grade point averages, on a 4-point scale. You know, B plus is a 3.7, or an A is a 4.0, C is a 2.0, whatever you say. And none of that changes. I think once you talk about what doesn't change, everybody gets less adversarial in this whole process. Assure them that we'll still have transcript. We'll still have academic honors. Just earlier today, I was in a conference call with a school that is, I think, very wisely going to the academic honor system that used to be pervasive in this country. They used the Latin phrases of summa cum laude, magna cum laude, and cum laude, or perhaps highest honors, high honors, and honors. That is the right way to do it. It is not saying that a 3.99995 is superior to a 3.99994, but rather the faculty got together and said, what are the characteristics in terms of grades, scholarship, maybe other values that you have of community service that represent highest honors? What are those values that objectively represent high honors? What are those values and performances that represent honors? And then, if in one year you have 3 people with highest honors, in the next year 0 students with highest honors, it's all fair and objective, not these silly distinctions taken out to 1/1000th of a decimal point. Now, here's the gold standard. Grades are part of feedback. Don't talk about grades without talking about the broader issue of feedback. You know, it's interesting. One of the things that I think you can do very constructively to begin this conversation with teachers and with parents is to ask, what's the best and the worst feedback that you've ever had? And it's interesting. People will talk about feedback that among the worst I've ever had is feedback that was nothing but a smiley face. Good job, but no specificity. Or oftentimes I'll hear the worst feedback was no feedback at all. Sometimes the worst feedback was, well, I got hammered at the end of the year, but it was too late for me to do anything. Your colleagues, your faculty, your parents and students, they know what good and bad feedback looks like. So before we do anything else, let's talk about what really great gold standard feedback is. Then let's talk about grades, because grading systems that are part of gold standard practice are so clear that students know what their own grades are. You want to have an interesting experiment this semester? A couple of weeks before the end of the semester, simply ask students to predict their own grades. In fact, administrators, counselors, here's what you can do. You probably have a list of 10 or 20 kids who are failing. Walk up to them in the lunchroom and say, hey, how's that 10th grade Algebra 2 class going? How's 9th grade English going? Oh, I'm doing fine. No sweat, counselor, no sweat, principal. And you know they're failing. That is evidence that the students don't understand the grading system. And so see if students can predict their own grades. And if they can, it's evidence of good and clear feedback. If they can't, it's something we need to work on. And also, I would argue that grades need to be consistent with external assessments. Too often, students get sucker punched. Either they get false reassurance, I'm wonderful, I'm great, and then they get hammered in the next year or in college, or they think that they're terrible and in fact they're doing pretty good. You don't believe me? If you're in a secondary school that has advanced placement classes, I will bet you right now that you'll find students that are getting A's and B's in that class that are getting 1s and 2s in the advanced placement exam. And every time I find students who are getting a C or a D in the class getting a 4 or 5 in the advanced placement. That usually means that they're being graded down for something that is obviously irrelevant to the task at hand. So what about homework? That's one of the other most emotional topics that you and I face. Well, we know what good practice looks like. Put aside the word homework for a minute and just ask about practice. Ask one of your athletic coaches. Ask a music director. What does good practice look like? And they'll tell you it's about immediate feedback and coaching. You know, none of your coaches send students home with a soccer ball or a baseball in their backpack saying, do the odd numbered problems 1 through 30. They practice together. They practice with immediate feedback. They practice with coaching. Your music directors are the same way. And yes, I know some kids do individual practice, but in a lot of schools where I work, the most important practice happens with immediate feedback, with coaching, with the director right there. Moreover, they're differentiated. Not all students need the same kind of coaching, whether it's an athletic endeavor or a musical endeavor. So they differentiate the practice so that each student is working not in something that's boring and not in something that's overwhelming, but something that is slightly outside their comfort zone. So what my principal, Mr. Robinson, used to tell me is that the word homework may or may not have anything to do with the word home. Students do need practice, but some of your students go home to an intact two-parent family where they look over the homework, maybe they do it for the kids, and everything's peachy. And other kids go home to chaos. And when I was teaching, some of my kids went home to those two-parent families, and some of my kids went home to three families living in a two-bedroom apartment, and it wasn't a place where homework is going to get done. So yes, they need practice, but let's stop the illusion that practice always happens at home. What they really need is gold standard practice, and that's what it looks like. So here's what the evidence says. Who are we grading anyway? What happens in a lot of cases where I'll ask, what is the predominant cause of failure? The predominant cause of failure is missing work. When work is missing, what are we punishing? Are we really punishing the students who fail to be responsible, as I hear teachers say? Or are we punishing them for not being lucky enough to be born in a home with parents who check homework or do it for them? In other words, we punish poverty. We punish broken homes rather than really rewarding and punishing the work ethic that we think we are. And I would frankly add, having a chaotic home environment is not a character defect. It just is the hand that they were dealt. So what I'm seeing as a best practice is eliminating homework as a part of grades. The only thing that matters is a student proficient or not? If they're doing all the homework, but they're not proficient in algebra or writing, they shouldn't be getting an A. Conversely, if they can do the algebra and writing, but they didn't turn in homework, they ought to be getting an A. It's not about compliance. It's all about what their quality of their work is. And at the elementary level, read Alexandra Neeson's article in Education Update. At K6, there is nada evidence that homework is related to student performance. I know. A lot of your parents insist on having homework. Great. Have them go home and read to a parent. Have them write a thank you note for a birthday or a holiday gift. But stop the nonsense that filling out worksheets at home is evidence of anything except what their zip code is and what their family structure is like. Stop assigning or grading homework at the elementary level. And I know a lot of middle and high school teachers who still assign it, but they do not grade it. All that matters is what's really proficient at the end of the semester. So let's consider some of the myths that surround grades. And myth number one is that grades motivate students. And why is this myth so pervasive? Because it motivated us. I'm willing to bet that almost everybody listening to this webinar is a college graduate. We're public school educators and administrators. It worked really well for us. We were motivated by grades. So the question before the house is, what percentage of your students do you expect to become public school educators? What percentage are going to be public school administrators? I'm guessing it's south of 100%. And if that's the case, stop assuming that our students are going to be like us. So here's the truth. Grading homework is a practice that improves student achievement. That's the myth. We'll contrast it to the reality. Myth number three, grades predict future performance. That's what we all want to believe, and we'll challenge that. Myth number four, punishment deters unwanted behavior. Hey, if you're the parent of teenagers as I am, you've probably been tempted to say, just whip those kids into shape, punishment works. We're all tempted. The only evidence is that what the evidence says? And myth number five, grading is really a matter of personal preference. Like everything else in teaching, it's really just an art. Some people like Picasso, some people like Monet, some people like grading as punishment, some people like grading as rewards. It's all, after all, a personal preference. And I'm here to tell you today that these myths are just that, appealing but not true. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute and listen to you. And you tell me, why are these 5 myths so appealing? Why do people really like them so much? Take a minute, and then I'll reconvene us. You can use the text or tweet, or you can use the question function on your webinar screen. Okay, some really thoughtful responses here. You said we believe in myths because myths are known. We fear the unknown. Myths allow us to cling to the status quo. I love that. You said there's a gap between where we are as educators and what we know about practices and where we need to be. It's how we determine what is comfortable for our colleagues. The punishment tactics goes back to an industrial mentality. Actually, it goes back earlier than that. I think it goes back to Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon era, where clubs and rocks worked. And I still have people who really do believe in that. So all these things and more, I think, are encapsulated by your very wise statement that says when we believe in myths, it allows us to avoid our own responsibility because we can always blame things on somebody else. So let's deconstruct these one by one. Do grades motivate students? And a minute ago I said, well, they do in kind of an odd way because toxic grading systems motivate kids to quit and fail. This is being broadcast originally in February, and I can tell you that in the springtime of every year, watch my words, in March and April, you will have students who either drop a class in the next few weeks, or they simply stop coming to class. Maybe they stop coming to school because in a toxic grading system, for example, that has the average, punishing kids in May for the mistakes of January, using the 0 on the 100-point scale, using grading as a punishment system. By March, they say, what the heck? There's nothing I can do. It's analogous to somebody who's made really, really good progress on a diet, but they have a slip and they eat some ice cream. And then they say, well, what the heck? I might as well eat a half gallon. And they give up entirely. Now, as irrational as that sounds, that is exactly what happens all the time to students. And it happens a couple of months into the semester when they make a mistake and they just say, there's no point in continuing. I might as well quit. So grades, sure enough, motivate people, just not in the way that we expect. What about myth number 2? Grading homework and practice improves student achievement. Well, I suppose it does only in this sense. If what we mean by achievement is students doing what they already know how to do, then I guess grading homework does that. For example, if I say do the odd numbered problems 1 through 30, and you already know how to do the odd numbered problems 1 through 30, and I call that achievement, I guess some kids are motivated by that. But you know what? A lot of kids are motivated to do precisely the opposite. They are bored, they're indignant, they'll answer 3 of those questions and say, look, I know how to do this. And if they answered 3 out of 30, then that is a solid 10% or an F, rather than a demonstration of proficiency. Let me illustrate with this example. Let's assume that we're at a basketball practice and I shoot free throws and I miss 15 in a row. But I'm lucky enough to have one of you as my teacher and coach. You improve my ball handling, my stance, my approach, my arm position, and then I make 15 in a row. So I missed 15, I got feedback, I made 15. Wouldn't we consider that a really good practice? I certainly would, whether that was algebra or whether that was music or whether that was basketball. Missing 15, getting feedback, making 15, That's really good practice. Is that what happens in homework? If I turned in a 30 problem homework assignment and had 15 right and 15 wrong, that's a 50% and a solid F. When in fact, a minute ago, we thought that was really good practice. What about number 3? Grades predict future performance. Well, I guess that would be true if future performance is the same as compliance. But part of what I included in your handouts is an article from the New York Times literally 2 days ago that says that there is a dramatic difference between what we reward in school for grades, and this disproportionately, by the way, happens to our girls and young women, and what is expected of them later on in the job. We have too many honor roll kids who are getting good grades by sullen compliance. Then they go to college, compliance doesn't work anymore. They're in the job market, compliance alone doesn't work anymore. They're expected to ask questions, be creative, take feedback, make mistakes, do all the things that are not rewarded in school. All they can do is engage in sullen compliance. Got them on the honor roll, but did not help them in jobs or in college. Number 4, punishment deters unwanted behavior. Hey, ask a bully near you. Hitting kids, beating them, that'll work in the short term. And what happens in school is if we engage in punishment, what's the behavior that we will deter? We will deter them from coming to school. Punishment doesn't work. We've known with more than a half a century of evidence on corporal punishment that when we administer corporal punishment to improve behavior, it not only does not improve behavior, it actually makes behavior worse. It leads to multi-generational bullying. That's why at least a majority of states, that unfortunately not all of them, don't allow corporal punishment anymore. And yet everybody still engages in what I would call academic corporal punishment. Grading as punishment simply does not work. Myth number 5, it's personal preference. And I guess that can be true also if the personal preference is whether or not kids come to school, whether or not kids succeed. But let's stay with the corporal punishment analogy. I would argue that if somebody had a personal preference for beating children, I would hope that at least a majority of people listening to this webinar would say that's really not a very good idea. So how do we bust these grading myths? Number 1, stop the myth that everybody's got to buy in. I hear this every day of my professional life. Well, Doug, we'll do these ideas on grading and homework, but first of all, we have to get buy-in from everybody. No, you don't. Some of you, not many, but some of you listening to this, remember when there was smoking in schools and faculty lounges were gas chambers. Believe me, the first time you disallowed smoking in school, there was not buy-in from people who were addicted to nicotine, but you stopped it anyway because it was unhealthy for everybody, the smokers and non-smokers alike. When you stopped corporal punishment, there were still people who really wanted to beat kids, but you stopped it anyway. You didn't wait for buy-in. Instead, the best practice that I'll show you in a minute is experimentation. Truly the scientific method, where teachers are willing to take a risk, try some new ideas, and have an adult science fair where they'll show their hypotheses, they'll show their interventions, they'll show their results. That's the only thing that works. If you wait for buy-in, it'll never happen. In fact, when a school leader says, well, Doug, I've got buy-in from everybody, one of two things is true. Either A, they're not asking for any significant change, or B, the real disagreement is happening in the parking lot. So stop expecting buy-in. Start expecting disagreement and resolve that not with rhetoric, but with experimentation, with action that happens before there's buy-in, and then after the action, after the results, then and only then does buy-in happen. What's the best practice here? It's teacher leadership. And teacher leadership happens with science fairs. I've seen these all across the country. And friends, they are so great. They are simple 3-panel displays. No glitter, no PowerPoint, no extra work, simply what the kids do. One panel is my challenge. Too many kids are not succeeding in my class. Too many parents are not participating in after-school activities. Too many kids are not having satisfactory attendance. Whatever you say, I completely defer to you as to what the challenge is. Panel 2, this is in the middle, my intervention. Well, I tried these parental contact ideas, these student engagement ideas, and as we'll see in a minute, these grading ideas. Panel 3 on the right, here's what my results are. So that's it. Challenge, intervention, results. When we do this, that is emblematic of inside-out change. Better than 100 books, better than 1,000 lectures. It's inside-out change that really works. Here's an example. You can see on the left-hand side, this teacher had what was my challenge. In the middle, their various actions. On the right, their results. Now that was fairly sophisticated, but notice they got it just on a 3-panel science fair display showing colleague to colleague, teacher to teacher, what really worked. Here's another one, a little less elegant. What was my challenge? They called it their problem. What was their process? What was their outcome? I'm not hung up on the vocabulary, but I'm very hung up on the process of moving from challenge to intervention to results. Let me give you some examples that I've seen just in the last few months. And by the way, I always use real names. This, if you read educational research that says, in a Midwestern district far, far away, nobody ever knows who that is. So I always use real names, real teachers, real administrators, real kids. Here's Mountain House High School. It's in California. Ben Faubert, F-O-B-E-R-T, is the principal. And they had what they called the success period. And what was interesting is they had the opportunity for kids who needed extra help to participate in success period to get extra help. And the fear was, oh my gosh, if I provide this during school, the lunatics will run the asylum, that I'll just have all these kids coming to class and they'll overwhelm the teachers. That was true for about 2 weeks. But look at what happened. The number of kids in success fell from grading period 1, that's GP1, from 369 to 268, a drop of 8%. It continued to drop until it dropped literally by more than 80%. In the latest success period, they went from 69 to 30. Notice that, from 369 to 30. That's a dramatic 90% decrease. Number of teachers who had 20 more students with a D and F fell, a 50% drop. The average success class size dropped from 13 students to 9. 167 students exited that program, and they won't return. And the number of students who are in success for 3 or more Ds and Fs, it's 38, still too many, but dramatically fewer than what they had before. So what did they do? They focused on mastery, not schoolmanship, not playing the game, not how many points do I have to get so my mom doesn't kill me, but rather what do I need to do to learn in this class and demonstrate mastery. They had meaningful consequences, such as constrictions on their time, not Fs and zeros. That's not a meaningful consequence. Constrictions on time are meaningful consequences. They were completely transparent. Students could explain to me, to an outsider, what the system was all about, and they were absolutely consistent. All the teachers did the same thing. Here's another one, San Giorgio High School in San Bernardino. I love these people. They said, I've got too many Ds and Fs in 9th grade math. And his intervention, and by the way, real teachers, real names, and Mr. Dahl, Michael Dahl was his name, had a 4-point scale. He used to have 100 points, 90, 80, 70, 60. He just went back to the old-fashioned A's a 4, B's a 3, C's a 2, and so on. Mr. Dahl stopped grading homework. He grades only on proficiency, and he doesn't include any non-academic factors. And the results went from more than 40 Ds and Fs to 0 in a single semester. Here's another San Bernardino school. This happened to be in high school science. Too many Ds and Fs. They went to focusing on proficiency, not the average. A 4-point scale, meaning A's a 4, B's a 3, just like we do GPAs now. They cut the Ds and Fs by more than 70%. But here's an interesting finding. They also had fewer A's. Now that was very unexpected. A lot of people assume when you have grading reform that it's just grading inflation. Everybody's grades go up. Not true. You do have fewer Ds and Fs because I'm focusing only on proficiency. But it turned out that there were a lot of A students that were getting by with extra credit or playing the point game. And in the words of these amazing teachers, they said, the conversation has changed from points to learning. And as a side note, Mr. Pham, one of these science teachers said, oh, by the way, discipline, culture, attendance, on time coming to class, all significantly improved. I think this is really important because when you have teachers talk to teachers, they don't just talk in grandiose terms about student achievement and proficiency. They talk about the nuts and bolts of classroom discipline, classroom culture, coming to class on time. All those things got better. So, what is the feedback that dominates the focus for teachers, students, and parents? Grading is the number one source of feedback. And so if we're going to improve feedback and grading, we've got to remember how to conduct the grading conversation. So far, all these things may seem logical to you, but I want to point out that they're not necessarily anything to be taken for granted. So the rule number one, when you have these conversations, is talk about what doesn't change. Remember, don't go down the trail of these people that say, oh, gee, if we could just get rid of letter grades, then everything would be better. That's not true. Colleges still have letter grades. Parents still want letter grades. Scholarship applications still have transcripts and letter grades. So I'm not saying get rid of that. If you've heard other people talk about grading reform saying get rid of letter grades, they are wrong. You can still have letter grades and avoid a ton of arguments with parents and with your community and your local newspaper. You'll still have transcripts. Don't let the rumor get out there that if you have improved grading policies, you lose transcripts and you can't get into college or have scholarship applications. Not true. We'll still have academic honors. Now, if it's up to me, you do like the other school did that I mentioned to you, highest honors, high honors, honors, and stop the nonsense of 3.99995 is better than 3.99994, but we can get past that. And we'll still have IEPs, individualized education plans. I don't know where that rumor came from. Of course we have. It's federal law, for goodness sake. But there's still a ton of people who are afraid that once you go down the path of grading reform, you lose IEPs. Just not true. So here's the best way I know of to start the grading conversation. If you're in a faculty meeting, if you're with a parent group, any group that is skeptical about this, ask them this question. What's the difference between students who make high marks and low marks? Take about 30 seconds on your own to speculate about that. And you're with a friend or a colleague. Tell me about the difference between the A and B kid and the D and F kid. I'll reconvene us in about 30 seconds. Some really thoughtful responses. Well, hey, it's better, more attentive parents, A versus B. It's prior knowledge. It's better reading capabilities. It's better attendance. It's better organization and time management. And all that may be true because it kind of makes intuitive sense. The A and B kids are just smarter. They have more cognitive horsepower than the D and F kids. So when you conduct this conversation with your colleagues, with teachers, with parents, get all of these hypotheses on the board without judgment, without opposition. Just list them all. What explains the difference between A and B students and D and F kids? High marks versus low marks. And then do this experiment. And if you get the handouts, you'll be able to do this yourself. Here's just a set of 10 marks. You can see that they're marked with quizzes, homeworks. The MA, by the way, means missing assignment. There's a homework, a midterm, some more homework, a quiz, some more homework, a quiz, and a final. And then all you do is ask those people, what's the final grade? Now think about this. This is the same student with the same intelligence, the same background knowledge, the same parents, the same everything. So I would assume that we would all calculate the same final grade. But friends, that's not what's happened with 10,000 teachers and administrators, not only in the United States, but around the world. The same kid with the same performance, the same missing work, the same final, the same everything, might have been an A or a B or a C or a D or an F. That is not fair. That's the very same kid with the same performance. And a minute ago, we said, well, I can tell you what makes the difference between the A kid and the F kid. No, you can't, because the A kid in this example had the identical performance as the D and F kid. The only difference was the different grading policies of the teachers who are answering this question. And so I really think we have to call ourselves to account. The differences are not what we thought that they were. The differences are our own grading policies. So how do we fix this? One way to fix it is to change the consequence of missing work. Here's a quick experiment you could do in 15 minutes after this webinar is over. Go to your last grading period, look at about 20 D's and F's, and ask why. Now, maybe it's attendance, maybe it's discipline. I'll bet you 90% of them are missing work. That's what really accounts for D's and F's. It's not discipline, it's not attendance, it's not all the things that we think, it's missing work. And if we can change the consequence for missing work, as I'll show you in a minute, we'll have fewer D's and F's. Get rid of the average. The average is primitive. And you've got some $1 million grading systems out there that you spent a ton of money on that is going to calculate the grade for the final grade for the student based on the average of the entire semester. Let me ask you this. If LeBron James moves into your school system, the average income is going to go up. Is that an accurate reflection of average income in your school system? Your fifth graders would know that that is a mathematical distortion. Stop using the average. It is never the best way to evaluate student results because it punishes kids in May for the sins of January. And what we in education want to be doing is having a process of resilience. Get feedback, improve it, get feedback, improve it, get feedback, improve it, so that I end up at the end of the semester far better than I started. We're coming up on track season in many schools. Ask your coach, are they going to decide who goes to state based upon the average times of practices all semester long, or who's running fastest at the end of the season? We know in so many areas that the average is not the best way to evaluate students. The 0 on the 100-point scale. Now, there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. Some people have gotten rid of zeros, but they create unnecessary controversy by saying, well, you can't give a 0, so the minimum score is 50. And then there you are in the front of the newspaper or in an editorial saying, this school over here is giving kids 50 points for doing nothing. So let me be clear. It's okay to give a 0 if it's mathematically accurate. And a mathematically accurate 0 is an A is a 4, a B is a 3, C is a 2, D is a 1, F is a 0. Because there's an equal interval between A, B, C, D, and F, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. But the 0 on a 100-point scale is inaccurate because when 90 is an A, 80 is a B, 70 is a C, 60 is a D, 60 is a D now. So 90, 80, 70, 60, 10 points between each of those. But not turning work in is a 0. You're saying that not turning it in, 60 points less than the D. It's got to be 6 times worse than doing it wretchedly and getting a D. Nobody believes that. So I'm not saying that it's impossible to give a 0. I'm saying it should be impossible to give a mathematically inaccurate 0. And as I'll explain in a minute, way before you give a 0, let's have better consequences for missing work. And that includes late work. I'm all in favor of kids being responsible, but when they turn work in late, don't say, well, I don't accept late work. We think that's a punishment. They think it's a reward. I've watched these kids. Hey, she doesn't accept late work, they say with a smile, meaning now I don't have to do it. It's much, much better to have the consequence for missing or late work be doing the work. And that includes constrictions on time as well. And lest we get all wrapped up in punishment, how about some incentives for early work, or maybe even a menu system where if I don't demonstrate proficiency one way, I demonstrate proficiency in different ways. For example, I've seen really smart social studies teachers who will say, okay, you can take the unit test, but I don't want to hear the dog ate the homework or I'm not a good test taker. If that doesn't work, then I'll give you one retake. But after that, hey, contrast a couple of different maps. Take a look at 4 newspaper editorials. Tell me the differences in point of view relevant to our unit. There are many ways to demonstrate proficiency. So here's the bottom line, friends. If you don't get grading right, nothing else matters. I don't care how good your standards, your curriculum, your assessment, everything is. If you don't get grading right, it undermines everything else that we do. So let's in sum talk about some short-term wins. Would your blood pressure be lower if you could go into every weekend with all the homework done? How about if you had fewer course failures, fewer repeaters, and by the way, parenthesis, more electives next year, because every section I don't have a section of repeaters is a section I get to teach something I'd really love to teach. And can we really do this in a year, even in a single semester? Here's what one school did. They had catch-up Fridays. If you're missing work between Monday and Thursday, that's between you and the teacher. But still missing on Friday morning, you go to the catch-up room and you catch up. Now look at what happened. Same kids, same teachers, same finals, same curriculum, from 385 to 15 Fs. Now I know the objection, and that is, well, gosh, these kids are missing Friday morning instruction. Look at that red bar, friends. The students who were failing, 385 of them, were not getting Friday morning instruction even though they were sitting there. When they went to catch up Fridays, they would get caught up. Now, was it perfect? Here's the other objection. Well, I know a kid that won't work for. He's just defiant, belligerent, and indifferent. Sure enough, I've met some of them, had some of them. But that's 15. They went from 385 to 15. Suspension rates got better. Attendance got better. If we'll let kids catch up during the day, great things happen. And since that research first came out, the school that adopted it has got more than $1 million extra coming in because students are moving into the district instead of moving out. They still have a dramatic reduction in failures and suspensions. And it's not perfect, but it's dramatically better. And here's the real catcher. The faculty didn't always agree off the bat, but today faculty morale is better than it's ever been because of better discipline, better performance, fewer failures. It's great for the entire school. So here are some things that you can do right now. You can still have traditional grades, but just use ABCDF. I'm not asking for any radical change here. You don't have to use 190, 80, 70, 60. Just use ABCDF in their numerical equivalents. A's a 4, B's a 3, C's a 2, D's a 1, F is a 0. Make that one change. You'll have better performance in one semester. Get rid of the average. If your computer defaults to the average, unplug it. You're paying for these computers. You're paying for these automated grading systems. Don't let the technology vendors run your school system. Stop using the average. Minimize or eliminate weighting of homework. I know a lot of schools that have basically eliminated that, and they're afraid, oh my gosh, if the homework doesn't count, then they won't do it. Sure enough, what they won't do is practice that is irrelevant, and they'll start doing practice during classroom, and they'll start admitting mistakes. When homework counts, all that is an incentive to download the answers from the internet, copy from somebody else, and have the illusion of proficiency and compliance, so the teacher never knows if the kids really got it or they don't. Experiment this semester with an early final exam. Have an incentive instead of just punishments. Kids who have A's or B's can take the final 10 days early. They have 10 days of freedom. And if they get a C, D, or an F, then they get feedback on how to improve it. I've watched as that has dramatically improved student performance at the secondary level in particular. Now, here are several different things you can do. The catch-up solution, I've already said, catch up every single week. Red, yellow, green system has to do with teachers and administrators conducting backpack inspections. If kids are missing work, I look in their backpack. Now, that doesn't take any extra time. You're not investing in after-school programs. It's a simple intervention, but I'll tell you what, when kids don't like adults getting into their backpacks, and I assure you they do not, they actually get work done, and failure rates go down dramatically. Quiet tables at lunch, to have a place where kids can get work done. I know that doesn't seem like a lot. Gee, it's just 20 or 30 minutes. That's a ton, and it makes the difference between getting work and not getting work done. I've seen coaches' corner happen, where the coaches who are revered and respected create a place in the gym. Kids sit on the floor, not designed for comfort, to get work done. And I'm not saying these are the only solutions. These are just things I've learned around the country. Give them a try to have at least one thing that you can do rather than F's and zeros for missing work. Now, let me conclude with some tough stuff on grading. Cheating and plagiarism at a 20-year high, according to the Journal of Ed Psych. Now, is that because kids are less moral today than ever before? I can tell you, I've talked to kids who don't know what plagiarism is because they've had an older sibling who cut and pasted their way to the honor roll. They think it's just being efficient. They don't understand that plagiarism is stealing. They signed an honor code that said, I will not plagiarize, and they still copy and paste all the time. So we need to start this literally at the elementary level, where kids understand that if I'm going to use Dr. Samantha Jones' work, I have to say, according to Dr. Samantha Jones, I'm not saying third graders have to do APA format, but they do have to know that stealing words is stealing. Little kids and older kids understand stealing. And the only way, and I'd never take Dr. Jones' property without asking her. I can't take her words without asking her either. So the way to avoid plagiarism is to practice citation. And if you catch somebody, make them redo it with appropriate citation. Same with cheating. Kids, moral, decent, good kids, think cheating is okay if their friends are under stress. If you ask them, is cheating okay? Oh, no, never. Cheating is bad news. Well, what if your friend is really stressed out? What if your friend's parents are getting divorced? What if your friends threaten to harm herself? Then all of a sudden, they invent all these rationalizations for cheating. So we have to create ways that when kids are under stress, cheating is not the default option, but getting help is. And when they want to copy something, plagiarism is copying without permission, and citation is copying with permission. They need to understand their contributions to the finished work. Group projects are the bane of so many teachers, and the best practice I'm seeing here is that we give not the old system of all the kids get the same grade for one kid's work, but rather each of us are going to be assigned our grade based not only upon the group project, but on our feedback to other people in the group. If you're using Google Classroom, that's a really fast and easy way to evaluate how did I use feedback to my peers to make their quality of work better. And if kids refuse to turn in work, you literally have got to be willing to stand over them and to have constrictions on time. It's not a 5-minute interchange. It's something that we do in class and get it done. So I want to conclude with this really challenging piece of research. Tell me about the student who's on your honor roll but is not proficient. Take about 30 seconds. They're on the honor roll, they're getting A's and B's, but when I look at their external tests, they're not proficient. See you in 30 seconds. Well, you pretty much nailed it. They're quiet, they're compliant, they are a pleasure to have in class. And you want to know what else they are? They are overwhelmingly our girls, because these girls are the ones who 2-to-1 in the United States are in the National Honor Society, even though their objective performance is slightly better in English language arts, about the same in math and science, but dramatically more in National Honor Society. And the article from the New York Times that I attached to your handouts for today is stunning, that we're rewarding girls for things that are not related to proficiency, and it does not help them. I know they're happy because they're on the honor roll, their parents are happy, but they're getting sucker punched when they go to college in the world of work. So part of what I want to do before we quit is to think about what the objections are. And you will have objections from students, parents, the community, and colleagues, because frankly, there are people for whom current grading systems work really well. Your highest achieving kids aren't going to want to change. So that's when you have to ask yourself the really tough questions. Are you in this for popularity, particularly popularity with the most vocal constituencies, or are you in this for maximum success? I guarantee you that when we have grading reform, it's not going to hurt your high-performing students. If anything, when they stop grubbing points and they stop playing school and they stop engaging in extra credit, things that are unrelated to proficiency, they will actually work harder and earn higher grades. So grading reform doesn't hurt your high-performing students, but what it will do is move the entire student body to higher levels of performance. And you're right, that may not be popular in every quarter. It's just the right thing to do. So we want to ask where you draw the line. Where you draw the line. If somebody says, I don't care, I believe in using the average. I believe in the 0 on the 100-point scale. I believe in grading as punishment. And you might be tempted to say, hey, we live in an era of academic freedom. My colleagues can do whatever they want to. So I'll just close by asking you this. Would you draw the line here? Because not that many years ago, friends, that's what school was like. Beating children for noncompliance. And if you thought that that was a bad idea then, and you think that's a bad idea today, then stop telling me it's a matter of academic freedom and we get to do whatever we want to. Corporal punishment is bad. Academic corporal punishment is just as bad. So I hope I'll get to see you in person in Boston. In just a few months, we'll have the Creative Leadership Summit there. You can use your smartphone to get the QR code from here and come visit our city. It's a lovely place to be, particularly at the end of June. We'll have a great curriculum for you, and I want to invite you to come visit me as well, because I live just a couple of blocks from where the venue is, and I'd love to spend some time and learn to get to know all of you better. So thanks very much for your time today. You can make a difference right now, and I want to invite you to use any of these means of contact for help. I'm happy to share all of the resources. We've got videos on these that are free. We've got articles that are free. We've got tools that you can use that are free. Please take advantage of them and let us get to know you better. Have a great rest of the day.